Hello, beautiful friends. I am Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, and also that is infused with the love of the angels, so that you can deepen in the connection with the divine love and guidance that is here for you. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, which are a beautiful way to connect with your divine guidance and your angelic team. I also offer soul mentoring, which provides for consistent support, love, and guidance as you navigate an expanse of transformation or change in life. And then I offer a variety of classes and circles. And you can learn more about my offerings at my website, illuminatingsouls.com, where you can also sign up for my daily inspiration email blast. But for now, I'm here to help you rest and fall asleep. You see, years ago, I started listening to sleep podcasts, and they have really become an essential part of my self-care. I'm one of those people that sometimes, even though I'm really tired, my mind hasn't gotten the memo, and so my mind keeps spinning and thinking, and I have found that listening to a sleep podcast gives my mind a chance to shift focus and wind down. And I love them so much that I have created this one for you. So if you're new to the world of sleep podcasts, let me make some suggestions to you. First of all, turn the volume down. You don't need to hear every word I say. And also, let it be okay if you drift off, because I promise not to bring forward any content you have to hear. It might sound weird to make an hour-long podcast in hopes that you will not hear most of it, but that is the way sleep podcasts work. And you may need to try this a few times before you really find out if it's effective for you. My hope is this will become a sanctuary of sorts, where as soon as you start hearing the podcast and the rhythm of my voice, it will symbolize and signal to you that your body and your consciousness can begin relaxing. And have I mentioned the angels yet? Because this podcast is infused with love for you. And angelic love and presence is highly compatible with sleep. While you listen to my voice with your permission, the angels will help to clear the energy field around you so that you get to go to sleep in a beautiful wave of love that has been calibrated just for you. So I invite you to cozy on up. Snuggle on in whatever that means to you. I happen to love lots of covers and pillows, so I fluff all the pillows around me and I pull the covers up over my head. So I invite you to get cozy in whatever way is meaningful to you. And just allow a wave of relaxation to move across your body. That you, your consciousness, and your body have done enough for this day. And now it is your time to get to rest, to go into that mysterious expanse of sleep when our bodies are healed and replenished, when our consciousness can recalibrate. And where hopefully you will get to have some very sweet dreams. When I start each of these episodes, I never quite know where we're going to go. And as I was doing my prep work, which isn't much, it typically involves me walking back to my office and plugging in my microphone and my headset, and then throwing my big cozy blanket over my head and the monitor, so I create a blanket fort of sorts. But in those few minutes, this is what I felt come through from the angels. They invite us, you and me, to give ourselves the space to release any disappointments we might be carrying. And as they brought that forward, I immediately could identify where within my own being I had some pockets of disappointment. Disappointment can take a lot of forms. We can be disappointed in ourselves that perhaps we haven't achieved what we think we should, or we're behaving in a way that doesn't feel good to us. We can feel disappointed in others. We can feel disappointed in humanity or in the world. Disappointment typically signals that there is an imbalance between what is right now and how we are holding for it in our hearts and our consciousness. Visioning an experience of the world that is not yet in 3D reality is not a bad thing. It's how we grow, right? It's how we evolve. The challenge is when we hold it in consciousness in a way that creates challenge within ourselves. So without waxing too poetic about this, because after all, I'm hoping you're getting ready to drift off to sleep, we're going to simplify this. That if you are willing, the angels will help clear from you any disappointment you're holding, especially maybe the disappointment you're not even aware of. And instead, they will help to shift consciousness so that you can feel more balanced, inspired, and feel a greater sense of well-being. So you take a deep breath in and release. And I'm going to call the angels in. They're already here, but we will invite them forward. So I invite you to join me in taking a nice deep breath in and out as we gently call ourselves forward into the heart of God. And beautiful angels on high, we invite you to join us here. We ask that you bring forward waves of divine love that is uniquely calibrated for each of the beloveds here with us now. We ask that you help to lift and clear any imbalance, any worry, anything that is not ours to carry. We ask that you clear our energy fields through the heart of God and send healing light in all dimensions of time. And this is what the angels are asking me to share with you. They say that they are grateful for your willingness to come into this space and receive the love that is here for you. They appreciate the love that you carry in your heart. They say you are a generous soul and that you are a source of light and goodness in this world. They also acknowledge that sometimes experiences and judgments can grow sticky within our own consciousness. And it is with this that they ask your permission if they might help you clear out any old stuck patterns of disappointment that truly no longer reflect the truth of your consciousness. There's nothing you need to do here other than to say yes. And if so, while you sleep, they will help work with you in the astral realm to bring forward positive shifts, healthy shifts, shifts that will help you expand your consciousness and really attune to the brightness of your authentic path. The angels affirm that this can be a bright time for you. That even though there is much chaos taking place, that this is also a time of change, and that there are opportunities that will be coming to you in the coming days and weeks and months that will enable you to shine your light, share your voice and your gifts, and cultivate a great sense of authentic fulfillment for yourself and for others too. The angels acknowledge you for the path of healing you have already been on. You are someone who has already moved through so much transformation. And the angels say thank you for showing up for yourself, because in showing up for yourself, you have made more space to be able to show up for others too. Your life is a blessing on this planet. And I feel the angels coming forward and saying, please do not lose hope. Hope is a powerful ally. Hope opens a portal of possibilities for you and for others. That when you are willing to see the world through the eyes of hope and love, you become a vessel for healing and goodness. Take a breath in and release. The angels invite you to come into alignment with the beautiful, big, bright soul that you are. You are a divine wise being, having a very human experience. But the divine wise one in you is resourceful and resilient. You are a creative spirit. You are a messenger. You are a visionary. You are a way shower. And you are someone who carries a vast amount of love in your soul. The world is brighter because you are here. So take a deep breath in and out and receive the blessings of love your angels are bringing to you now. They are bathing you in a soft pink light. This will help to clear away any old judgments that you have been carrying about yourself. They are bringing in waves of forgiveness and light to help you reorient yourself within yourself so that it is easier for you to see the brightness in your soul. You know, it's easy to forget who we are sometimes. I'm guided to share with you this experience I had many years ago when I was at the University of Santa Monica. There was a classmate of mine. She was older than I was, and she was, my perception of her, that she was powerful and wise. And periodically, when we were having an exchange, she would try to reflect to me how she saw me. And usually she would say things like, there's so much power that moves through you. There's wisdom that moves through you. And I would sort of receive it and then brush it off. I don't know if any of you ever do that with compliments or reflections. I would say something like, oh, thank you. You are too. And I think one day she kind of got this download to wake me up. And she caught me by my hands. And she looked into my eyes and she said, you are a powerful goddess woman. And I did my usual, like, oh, thank you, you are too. And she just got really powerful and quiet and loud all at the same time. And she said, I know who I am. I am telling you who you are. And there was like this rumble, like this wubba, 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 like, pay attention, girl. And I took it in. And that moment has stayed with me because I think it's so easy to lose sight of who we are. And even when others try to reflect back to us who we are, we can't always take it in. So I invite you to take this in right now. You are a beautiful, divine being. You are a big, bright soul. And your presence here is a portal through which more love and light comes into this world. And if you're thinking, oh, she's talking to other people listening, not to me, this is for you too. If it wasn't true, you would not be listening to this message. Take a breath in and remember who you are. Please do not let the shadow cause you to forget, because it tends to do that to all of us. To me too. You know, I have worked with the angels now for 16 or 17 years, and I still forget. It's not uncommon for me to talk to my husband about something that's bothering me. It's my sad story about whatever is gnawing at me that day, because I'm a human being. And almost always my husband will say, have you talked to your friends yet? Which is code for, have I asked the angels for support yet? My answer is almost always no, because when I'm in that place, I forget I can ask and receive support. So this is the invitation. Give yourself permission to ask and receive support for whatever is on your heart right now. Let the angels help you remember who you are as a beloved of this world. We are so deeply grateful for the gift of you. It's a miracle that you're even hearing this message, isn't it? That I am sitting in my office in Northern California with a blanket pulled over my head, recording this message so that at some point in time you will hear it, that somehow it will find you. Isn't that amazing? That somehow the angels would drop this into your stream of consciousness so that you can feel their love and their light and come into greater harmony with the truth of your beautiful spirit. That's a miracle, and you are a miracle too. So you have a good rest, and while you rest, the angels will watch over you. And I'm going to read to you. So tonight I'm going to read to you from a very sweet, charming book called The Amulet by Edith Nesbitt. It is about time-traveling children, right? You had me at time travel. And I first learned about this book from Otis Gray and his Sleepy podcast, where he read from it. And I just fell in love. I thought this was such a sweet, interesting book. And I'm glad I can read it to you now. And also shout out to the Sleepy podcast by Otis Gray. It's wonderful. And I really encourage you to take a listen because he's wonderful and his voice is very sleep-inducing. I listen to it all the time. So, about our time-traveling children, there are 5 siblings, one of whom is still a baby. And the baby, who they call the Lamb, that's his nickname, is off with their mother. Now, their mother's gotten sick and she's had to travel to a different climate to recover. So that's how they get the mom out of the way so this adventure can happen. You know, so many of these stories are about somehow getting the parents out of the way so the children can have an adventure, right? So mom's off recovering. Dad is out of the country on business. So the 4 siblings that we're on this adventure with are Anthea, Cyril, Robert, and Jane. The 4 children are staying in the care of old nurse, who used to be their nurse and now has a boarding house. And right now, the 4 children and an absent-minded professor, a learned, educated man who studies antiquities, they are the only boarders in the house. Along their adventures, actually in a previous book, the 4 siblings met a sand fairy called the Psammead. Now, the Psammead is as old as the world. And there used to be many sand fairies, but they now believe they are the only one left. And they sleep by burrowing deep into the sand, and that's how they get their energy. And if they happen to get wet, they get a terrible cold and may not survive. So in a previous book, they discovered that the sand fairy could grant their wishes. But if you've read other books about wishes being granted, you know they often come through in ways that are very complicated and unexpected, and that's what one of the previous books was about. So they have said that they will not ask the Psammead for any other wishes. The challenge is, though, they now have a big wish. The wish is that Mother and the Lamb and Father would come home so they could all be together again. But they can't ask the Psammead for that wish, so the Psammead helps them find this workaround. That there is a very powerful talisman called the Amulet. And the amulet could grant that wish. And they just happen to, in these stories, how things just happen. They happen to find half the amulet in an antique shop in London. And they bring it home. They discover that if they say a very powerful name associated with the amulet turns into a portal where they can travel. So the plan is to try and go back in time to when the amulet was whole and find the other half. This is the premise of the story. So this travel has taken them to Babylon, where they have met the queen, and they've told her about the Psammead. And Jane and the Psammead actually didn't want to meet the queen, so they have gone off with a very kind woman who's helping take care of the children while they're in Babylon. And Robert says the wrong thing, and as is wont to happen, the other 3 children get thrown into the dungeon. And they have just found their way out of the dungeon using magic by calling on, I think he must be like one of their gods or magicians or something, and they find their way back to the queen. I know this is confusing, but it's okay. It's really a charming story. Hopefully you're asleep by now. I'm not great at recapping stuff. and they find that Jane and the Psammead are with the Queen. So we're picking up the story where the three siblings have just come back into the room where the Queen, Jane, and the Psammead are. So, and even if it doesn't make sense, you'll still enjoy it. The Queen says, I wanted to have the Psammead all to myself for a bit. You'll excuse the little natural deception. It's part of the Babylonish character, don't you know? But I don't want anything to happen to you. Let me rouse someone. No, 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 said Anthea with desperate earnestness. She thought she knew enough of what the Babylonians were like when they were roused. We can go by our own magic, and you will tell the king that it wasn't the guard's fault. It was Nisroch, and Nisroch is the magician or god that they called on for help. Nisroch, echoed the Queen. You are indeed magicians. Jane sat up, blinking stupidly. Hold it up and say the word. And what they mean is Jane has the half of the amulet and she needs to hold it up and say the word so the portal will open and take them back to London. So hold it up and say the word, cried Cyril, catching up the Psammead, which mechanically bit him, but only very slightly. Which is the east? Asked Jane. Behind me, said the Queen. Why? Haku Secha, said Jane sleepily and held up the charm. And there they all were in the dining room at 300 Fitzroy Street. So now they're back in their home and in their time. Jane, cried Cyril with great presence of mind, go and get the plate of sand down for the Psammead, because the Psammead needs to go into sand to sleep. Jane went. Look here, he said quickly as the sound of her boots grew less loud on the stairs. Don't tell her about the dungeon and all of that. It'll only frighten her so that she'll never want to go anywhere else. Righto, said Cyril, but Anthea felt that she could not have said a word to save her life. Why did you want to come back in such a hurry? Asked Jane, returning with a plate of sand. It was awfully jolly in Babylon, I think. I liked it no end. Oh, yes, said Cyril carelessly. It was jolly enough, of course. But I thought we'd been there long enough. Mother always says you oughtn't wear out your welcome. Chapter 8. The Queen and London. Now tell us what happened to you, said Cyril to Jane, when he and the others had told her all about the Queen's talk and the banquet and the variety entertainment, carefully stopping short before the beginning of the dungeon part of the story. It wasn't much good going, said Jane, if you didn't even try to get the amulet. We found out it was no go, said Cyril. It's not to be got in Babylon. It was lost before that. We'll go to some other jolly, friendly place where everyone is kind and pleasant, and look for it there. Now tell us about your part. Oh, said Jane, the Queen's man with the smooth face. What was his name? Ritti Marduk, said Cyril. Yes, said Jane. Ritti Marduk. He came for me just after the Psammead had bitten the guard of the gate's wife, little boy, and he took me to the palace, and we had supper with a new little queen from Egypt. She is a dear, not much older than you. She told me heaps about Egypt, and we played ball after supper, and then the Babylon Queen sent for me. I like her too, and she talked to the Psammead, and I went to sleep, and then you woke me up, that's all. The Psammead roused from its sound sleep and told the same story. But, it added, what possessed you to tell that queen that I could give wishes? I sometimes think you were born without even the most rudimentary imitation of brains. The children did not know the meaning of rudimentary, but it sounded a rude, insulting word. I don't see that we did any harm, said Cyril sulkily. "Oh no," said the Psammead with withering irony. "Not at all. Of course not. Quite the contrary. Exactly so. Only she happened to wish that she might soon find herself in your country, and soon may mean any moment." "Well, then it's your fault," said Robert, "because you might just as well have made soon mean some moment next year or next century." "That's where you, as so often happens, make the mistake," rejoined the Sand Fairy. "I couldn't mean anything but what she meant by soon. It wasn't my wish. And what she meant was the next time the king happens to go out lion hunting, so she'll have a whole day, and perhaps two, to do as she wishes with. She doesn't know about time only being a mode of thought." "Well," said Cyril with a sigh of resignation, "we must do what we can to give her a good time. She was jolly decent to us. I say, suppose we were to go to St. James Park after dinner and feed those ducks that we never did feed. After all that Babylon and all those years ago, I feel as if I should like to see something real and now. You'll come, Psammead?" "Where's my priceless woven basket of sacred rushes?" asked the Psammead morosely. "I can't go out with nothing on, and I won't, what's more." And then everybody remembered with pain that the bass bag had, in the hurry of departure from Babylon, not been remembered. "But it's not so extra precious," said Robert hastily. "You can get them given to you for nothing if you buy fish in Farrington Market." "Oh," said the Psammead very crossly indeed, "so you presume on my sublime indifference to the things of this disgusting modern world to fob me off with a traveling equipage that costs you nothing. Very well, I shall go to sand. Please don't wake me." And it went then and there to sand, which, as you know, meant to bed. The boys went to St. James Park to feed the ducks, but they went alone. Anthea and Jane sat sewing all the afternoon. They cut off half a yard from each of the best green Liberty sashes. A towel cut in two formed a lining, and they sat and sewed and sewed and sewed. What they were making was a bag for the Psammead. Each worked at half of the bag. Jane's half had 4-leafed shamrocks embroidered on it. They were the only things she could do, because she had been taught how at school, and fortunately some of the silk she had been taught with was left over. And even so, Anthea had to draw the pattern for her. Anthea's side of the bag had letters on it, worked hastily but affectionately in a chain stitch. They were something like this: Sam's Travel Car. She would have put traveling carriage, but she made the letters too big, so there was no room. The bag was made into a bag with old nurse's sewing machine, and the strings of it were Anthea's and Jane's best red hair ribbons. At tea time, when the boys had come home with a most unfavorable report of the St. James Park ducks, Anthea ventured to waken the Psammead and to show it its new traveling bag. It said, sniffing a little contemptuously, yet at the same time affectionately. "It's not so dusty." The Psammead seemed to pick up very easily the kind of things that people said nowadays. For a creature that had in its time associated with megatheriums and pterodactyls, its quickness was really wonderful. "It's more worthy of me," it said, "than the kind of bag that's given away with a pound of plaice. When do you propose to take me out in it?" "I should like a rest from taking you or us anywhere," said Cyril. But Jane said, "I want to go to Egypt. I did like that Egyptian princess that came to marry the king in Babylon. She told me about the larks they have in Egypt and the cats. Do let's go there." And I told her what the bird things on the amulet were like, and she said it was the Egyptian writing. The others exchanged looks of silent rejoicing at the thought of their cleverness in having concealed from Jane the terrors they had suffered in the dungeon below the Euphrates. Egypt is so nice too, Jane went on, because of the Dr. Brewer's scripture history. I would like to go there when Joseph was dreaming those curious dreams, or when Moses was doing wonderful things with snakes and sticks. I don't care about snakes, said Anthea, shuddering. Well, we needn't be in that part, but Babylon was lovely. We had cream and sweet sticky stuff, and I expect Egypt's the same. There was a good deal of discussion, but it all ended in everybody's agreeing to Jane's idea. And next morning, directly after breakfast, which was Kipper's and very nice, the Psammead was invited to get into his traveling carriage. The moment after it had done so, with stiff, furry reluctance, like that of a cat when you want to nurse it, and its ideas are not the same as yours, old Nurse came in. Well, chickies, she said, are you feeling very dull? Oh, no, Nurse dear, said Anthea, we're having a lovely time. We're just going off to see some old ancient relics. Ah, said old Nurse, the Royal Academy, I suppose. Don't go wasting your money too reckless, that's all. She cleared away the kipper bones and the tea things, and when she had swept up the crumbs and removed the cloth, the amulet was held up and the order given, just as Duchess and other people give it to their coachmen. To Egypt, please, said Anthea, when Cyril had uttered the wonderful name of power. When Moses was there, added Jane. And there in the dingy Fitzroy Street dining room the amulet grew big, and it was an arch, and through it they saw a blue, blue sky and a running river. No, stop, said Cyril, and pulled down Jane's hand with the amulet in it. What silly cuckoos we all are, he said. Of course we can't go. We daren't leave home for a single minute now for fear that that minute should be the minute. What minute be what minute? Asked Jane impatiently, trying to get her hand away from Cyril. The minute when the Queen of Babylon comes, said Cyril, and then everyone saw it. For some days, life flowed in a very slow, dusty, uneventful stream. The children could never go out all at once because they never knew when the king of Babylon would go out lion hunting and leave his queen free to pay them with the surprise visit to which she was, without doubt, eagerly looking forward. So they took it in turns, 2 and 2, to go out and 2 stay in. The stay-at-homes would have been much duller than they were, but for the new interest taken in them by the learned gentleman. He called Anthea one day to show her a beautiful necklace of purple and gold beads. I saw one like that, she said, in the British Museum, perhaps. I like to call the place where I saw it in Babylon, said Anthea cautiously. A pretty fancy, said the learned gentleman, and quite correct too, because, as a matter of fact, these beads did come from Babylon. The other 3 were all out that day. The boys had been going to the zoo, and Jane had said so plaintively, I'm sure I'm fonder of rhinoceroses than either of you are, that Anthea had told her to run along then. And she had run, catching the boys before that part of the road where Fitzroy Street suddenly becomes Fitzroy Square. I think Babylon is most frightfully interesting, said Anthea. I do have such interesting dreams about it. At least, not dreams exactly, but quite as wonderful. Do sit down and tell me, said he. So she sat down and told, and he asked her a lot of questions, and she answered them as well as she could. Wonderful, wonderful, he said at last. Once heard of thought transference, but I never thought I had any power of that sort, yet it must be that. And very bad for you, I should think. Doesn't your head ache very much? He suddenly put a cold, thin hand on her forehead. No, thank you, not at all, she said. I assure you it's not done intentionally, he went on. Of course, I know a good deal about Babylon, and I unconsciously communicate it to you. You've heard of thought reading, but some of the things you say I don't understand. They never enter my head, and yet they're so astoundingly probable. It's all right, said Anthea reassuringly. I understand, and don't worry. It's all quite simple, really. It was not quite so simple when Anthea, having heard the others come in, went down, and before she had time to ask how they had liked the zoo, heard a noise outside, compared to which the wild beasts' noises were gentle as singing birds. Good gracious, cried Anthea, what's that? The loud hum of many voices came through the open windows. Words could be distinguished. There's a guy. This isn't November, that isn't a guy. It's a ballet lady, that's what. Not it. It's a bloomin' loony, I tell you. Then came a clear voice that they knew. Retire, slaves, it said. What's she saying? Cried a dozen voices, some blamed foreign lingo, one voice replied. The children rushed to the door. A crowd was on the road and pavement. In the middle of the crowd, plainly to be seen from the top of the steps, was the beautiful face and bright veil of the Babylonian Queen. Jiminy, cried Robert, and ran down the steps. Here she is. Here, she cried. Look out. Let the lady pass. She's a friend of ours coming to see us. Nice friend for a respectable house, snorted a woman with marrows on a handcart. All the same, the crowd made way for a little. The Queen met Robert on the pavement, and Cyril joined them. The Psammead bag still is on his arm. Here, he whispered, here's the Psammead. You can get wishes. I wish you'd come in a different dress if you had to come, said Robert. But it's no use my wishing anything. No, said the Queen. I wish I was dressed. No, I don't. I wish they were dressed properly. Then they wouldn't be so silly. The Psammead blew itself out till the bag was a very tight fit for it, and suddenly every man, woman, and child in that crowd felt that it had not enough clothes on. For, of course, the Queen's idea of proper dress was the dress that had been proper for the working classes 3,000 years ago in Babylon, and there was not much of it. Lucky me, said the marrow-selling woman. Whatever could took me to come out in this figure, and she wheeled her cart away very quickly. Someone's made a pretty guy of you. Talk of guys, said a man who sold bootlaces. Well, don't you talk, said the man next to him. Look at your own silly legs, and where's your boots? I never come out like this. I'll take my sacred, said the bootlace seller. I wasn't quite myself last night, I'll own, but not to dress up like a circus. The crowd was all talking at once and getting rather angry, but no one seemed to think of blaming the Queen. Anthea bounded down the steps and pulled her up. The others followed, and the door was shut. Blow it if I can make it out, they heard. I'm off home, I am. And the crowd, coming slowly to the same mine, dispersed, followed by another crowd of persons who were not dressed in what the Queen thought was the proper way. We shall have the police here directly, said Anthea, in the tones of despair. Oh, why did you come dressed like that? The Queen leaned against the arm of the horsehair sofa. How else can a queen dress, I should like to know, she questioned. Our Queen wears things like other people, said Cyril. Well, I don't. And I must say, she remarked in an injured tone, that you don't seem very glad to see me now. I have come. But perhaps it's the surprise that makes you behave like this. Yet you ought to be used to surprises. The way you vanished, I shall never forget it. The best magic I have ever seen. How did you do it? Oh, never mind about that now, said Robert. You see, you've gone and upset all those people, and I expect they'll fetch the police, and we don't want to see you collared and put in prison. You can't put queens in prison, she said loftily. Oh, can't you? Said Cyril. What a hideous city yours is, the queen went on pleasantly. And what horrid, ignorant people. Don't you know they actually can't understand a single word I say? Can you understand them? Asked Jane. Of course not. They speak some vulgar northern dialect. I can understand you quite well. And just as an aside, there's something about traveling with the amulet and the magic that allow them to understand other languages and vice versa. Sort of like what happens in Doctor Who and the TARDIS. But anyways, I digress. We'll come back to the story. I'm really not going to explain again how it was that the children could understand other languages than their own so thoroughly and talk them too, so that it felt and sounded to them just as though they were speaking English. Well, said Cyril bluntly, now you've seen just how horrid it is. Don't you think you might as well go home again? Why, I've seen simply nothing yet, said the queen, arranging her starry veil. I wished to be at your door, and I was. Now I must go and see your king and queen. Nobody's allowed to, said Anthea in haste. But look here. We'll take you and show you everything you'd like to see. Anything you can see, she added kindly, because she remembered how nice the queen had been to them in Babylon, even if she had been a little deceitful in the matter of Jane and Psammead. There's the museum, said Cyril hopefully. There are lots of things from your country there. If only we could disguise you a little. I know, said Anthea suddenly. Mother's old theater cloak, and there are lots of her old hats in the big box. The blue silk, lace-trimmed cloak did indeed hide some of the queen's startling splendors, but the hat fitted very badly. It had pink roses in it, and there was something about the coat or the hat or the queen that made her look somehow not very respectable. Oh, never mind, said Anthea when Cyril whispered this. The thing is to get her out before nurse has finished her 40 winks. I should think she's about got to the 39th wink by now. Come on then, said Robert. You know how dangerous it is. Let's make haste into the museum. If any of those people do fetch the police, they won't think of looking for you there. The blue silk coat and the pink-rosed hat attracted almost as much attention as the royal costume had done, and the children were uncommonly glad to get out of the noisy streets into the gray quiet of the museum. Parcels and umbrellas to be left here, said a man at the counter. The party had no umbrellas, and the only parcel was the bag containing the Psammead, which the queen had insisted should be brought. I am not going to be left, said the Psammead softly, so don't you think it. I'll wait outside with you, said Anthea hastily, and went to sit on the seat near the drinking fountain. Don't sit so near that nasty fountain, said the creature crossly. I might get splashed. Anthea obediently moved to another seat and waited. Indeed, she waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. The Psammead dropped into an uneasy slumber. Anthea had long ceased to watch the swing door that always let out the wrong person, and she was almost asleep herself, and still the others did not come back. It was quite a start when Anthea suddenly realized that they had come back, and they were not alone. Behind them was quite a crowd of men in uniform, and several gentlemen were there, and everyone seemed very angry. Now go, said the nicest of the angry gentlemen. Take the poor demented thing home, and tell your parents she ought to be properly looked after. If you can't get her to go, we must send for the police, said the nastiest gentleman. But we don't wish to use harsh measures, added the nice one, who was really very nice indeed, and seemed to be over all the others. May I speak to my sister a moment first? Asked Robert. The nicest gentleman nodded, and the officials stood round the Queen and the others, forming a sort of guard, while Robert crossed over to Anthea. "Everything you can think of," he replied to Anthea's glance of inquiry. "Kicked up the most frightful shine in there. Said those necklaces and earrings and things in the glass cases were all hers. Would have them out of the cases. Tried to break the glass. She did break one bit. Everybody in the place has been at her. No good. What I want to say is, can't you get her to go with you quietly?" "I'll try," said Anthea, and went up to the Queen. "Do come home," she said. "The learned gentleman in our house has a much nicer necklace than anything they've got here. Come and see it." The Queen nodded. "You see," said the nastiest gentleman, "she does understand English." "I was speaking Babylonian, I think," said Anthea bashfully. "My good child," said the nice gentleman, "what you're talking is not Babylonian but nonsense. You just go home at once and tell your parents exactly what happened." Anthea took the Queen's hand and gently pulled her away. The other children followed, and the crowd of angry gentlemen stood on the steps watching them. It was when the little party of disgraced children, with the Queen who had disgraced them, had reached the middle of the courtyard, that her eyes fell on the bag where the Psammead was. She stopped short. "I wish," she said, very loud and clear, "that all those Babylonian things would come out to me here, slowly, so that those dogs and slaves can see the working of a great Queen's magic." "Oh, you are a tiresome woman," said the Psammead in its bag, but it puffed itself out. Next moment there was a crash. The glass swing doors and all their framework were smashed, suddenly and completely. The crowd of angry gentlemen sprang aside when they saw what had done this. But the nastiest of them was not quick enough, and he was roughly pushed out of the way by an enormous stone bull that was floating steadily through the door. It came and stood beside the Queen in the middle of the courtyard. It was followed by more stone images, by great slabs of carved stone, bricks, helmets, tools, weapons, fetters, wine jars, bowls, bottles, vases, jugs, saucers, seals, and the round long things, something like rolling pins with marks on them, like the print of a bird feet, necklaces, collars, rings, armlets, earrings, heaps and heaps and heaps of things, far more than anyone had time to count or even see distinctly. All the angry gentlemen had abruptly sat down on the museum steps, except the nice one. He stood with his hands in his pockets, just as though he was quite used to seeing great stone bulls, and all sorts of small Babylonish objects float out into the museum yard. But he sent a man to close the big iron gates. A journalist, who was just leaving the museum, spoke to Robert as he passed. "Theosophy, I suppose," he said. "Is she Mrs. Besant?" "Yes," said Robert recklessly. And just as an aside, they're talking about Annie Besant, who was a writer of Theosophy, which was metaphysics back in the day. The journalist passed through the gates just before they were shut. He rushed off to Fleet Street, and his paper got out the new edition within half an hour. Mrs. Besant and Theosophy. Impertinent miracle at the British Museum. People saw it in fat black letters on the boards carried by the sellers of the newspapers. Some few people who had nothing better to do went down to the museum on the tops of omnibuses. But by the time they got there, there was nothing to be seen, for the Babylonian Queen had suddenly seen the closed gates and felt the threat of them, and said, "I wish we were in your house." And of course, instantly they were. The Psammead was furious. "Look here," it said. "They'll come after you and they'll find me. There'll be a national cage built for me at Westminster, and I shall have to work at politics. Why wouldn't you leave the things in their places?" "What a temper you have, haven't you?" said the Queen serenely. "I wish all the things were back in their places. Will that do for you?" The Psammead swelled and shrank and spoke very angrily. "I can't refuse to give your wishes," it said, "but I can bite. And I will if this goes on. Now then." "Oh, don't," whispered Anthea close to its bristling ear. "It's dreadful for us, too. Don't you desert us. Perhaps she'll wish herself at home again soon." "Not she," said the Psammead a little less crossly. "Take me to see your city," said the Queen. The children looked at each other. "If we had some money, we could take her about in a nice cab. People wouldn't notice her so much. But we haven't. Sell this," said the Queen, taking a ring from her finger. And with that, my friends, we're going to leave the children and the Queen and the Psammead in their predicament. We'll come back to it, and we'll see how it ends soon. But thank you for letting me share this story with you. I find it so charming. I'm a sucker for time travel stuff. Outlander, Doctor Who, all that kind of stuff I always find so interesting. So I hope you slept through most of it, but if you're still awake, I'm glad to share it with you. And you can always queue up another episode. So the angels and I wish you sweet dreams. May you have a good rest. May you know that you are loved and you are a blessing here on earth. Thank you. We'll talk again soon.